All right, this is long overdue, but I'm going to share how I make challah. So this is my challah recipe. It will start with 2 cups of warm water at about 105 degrees. So I like to measure my water in the sink. Okay, here is my 2nd cup of water. Again, about 105 or so degrees. That's how the whole thing begins. Now, to this water comes the most important ingredient in all of bread baking, yeast. So I use active dry yeast. I use about 5 teaspoons of active dry yeast. So 5 teaspoons of active dry yeast, and then to activate the yeast, 1 tablespoon of sugar. Put that right in. And then a little bit of a whisk. And she's good to go. So what I'll do is let this sit over in the mixing stand. And then start making the guts. So the guts, or the goopy mix, or whatever, I don't even know what it's called, begins with a half a cup of canola oil. And before I put the canola oil away, I splash a little bit at the bottom of the bowl for where the dough will be. That way it doesn't stick to the bowl. I'm good with the canola oil. And now when you find challah in the store, what's it called? Egg bread, right? So for the eggs, I'm going to use 3 total, but one whole egg. And then 2 egg yolks. And then mix, mix, mix. Now that the eggs and the oil are in, it's time for my secret ingredient, what I call like my secret spice pack. It's just something I've played with over the years. Nothing fancy really, but it starts with a little bit of vanilla. And I use 3 teaspoons. The next is cinnamon, and I look for, I've been using this container for a while, but you have the holes here, and I use 1 shake, just one shake of cinnamon. Otherwise, it's too much. Because I played around with this too. A lot of people were able to detect it too easily, or it took me a few years to kind of get all of these spices just right, where people would detect, heavy this or, heavy that. And then for cloves, I look for the shaker about this. This is 2 shakes. 1 shake, 2 shakes. And then nutmeg, container about this, and that's 3 shakes. 1 shake, 2 shakes, 3 shakes. And so that's my secret, flavor pack. Sometimes I'll get weird and I'll add maybe a tablespoon of honey or a splash of honey in there, but this is the basics, right? It seems to me that is the right amount of spices that I've played around with to where the flavor is subtle enough. You can hint that, you can detect that it's there, but it's not it's not a feature. The feature is still the challah. So now I'm about to pour this into the yeast mix currently, and the yeast should look like right before you pour everything in. And now I'm ready just to pour the mixture in. right. The KitchenAid stand mixer is like where everything is at. So the next part is to start mixing it in. For the mixing, I just use the dough hook. I use the dough hook all throughout. I don't mess around with the different gadgets or anything like that. So just the plain old dough hook is what does the mixing. But before I mix it for the first round, I start with 1 cup of flour. And I'll usually mix it for about 10 seconds, 12 seconds. Level 3. Now that the mixture is in, we've started making the dough, it's time to add the 2nd cup of flour and then the sugar. For the sugar, I use 1 cup. 1 full cup of sugar, and then sometimes I will make a little bit more. Can't have too much sugar. Well, I mean you can, but not by a little bit. So 1 cup of sugar. And then mix again and again for about 10 to 12 seconds, level 3 on the dough hook. Now that the sugar is mixed in, it's time for the salt. Salt seems, from what I read anyway, doesn't like to play well with yeast, so I usually add that last. And the salt is 1 tablespoon. So 1 tablespoon of kosher salt. And then 1 more cup of flour. This next part involves a lot of just looking at what's happening. We're going to add the rest of the flour slowly, but it's really about seeing the texture of what we're looking at. So I'll show you where we're currently at. This is the mixture as it stands now. And we're going to slowly add flour to where it becomes the dough ball we want. And so we start with 1 cup at a time. Okay, with the 1 cup of flour, and now that we're done mixing all the ingredients, I put the dough hook down and I put it on level 1. And now it's just about watching. I want to make sure that we're slowly making a nice dough ball. So as soon as I see it start to become a bit liquidy, like right in the middle, right about there, and you can start seeing it, it'll start sticking to the sides. That's when I stop it and then add the next cup of flour. Yeah, right about there. So here's my 2nd cup of flour, or not second, it turns out to be the fifth total cup of flour, but the 2nd one where I'm done mixing ingredients. So again, this is where I want to start spotting the actual dough, setting 1, and now I have the spatula, and so I'm going to start scraping it off the sides to make sure that all the flour is off of the side of the bowl. And the reason why I do this now is that it'll tell me when to stop, right? Once I see it sticking to the side of the bowl, I'm ready for my next cup of flour. And usually it's about 7 total cups. And we're on 5, right? See, it's stuck to the back there. So I'm going to pause here and then add my next cup of flour. Here's the next cup of flour. Again, setting 1. And be ready to scrape anything off the side there. It's starting to stick to the side of the bowl a little bit, so we're ready for the next cup. All right, next cup. So this is not ready to get out of the bowl yet, but it also doesn't look like it's gonna need an entire other cup of flour. So you can see it's still like goopy from the dough hook. And so I'm gonna I'll still add another cup because you know, it's not gonna get over floured, not at this point anyway. So there's my next cup. And this will be the last one in the mixing bowl. I can tell already, you know, when this one mixes in, we're gonna move it to the counter and start kneading it. That's about where I want it to look before I take it out of the bowl. So now it's gonna be time to start getting ready to knead the dough. And so to do that, we have to prepare the countertop and then be ready to start kneading. To prepare the countertop, of course, sprinkle a little bit of flour on there. I keep a full cup just to use spare so I don't have to keep digging into the flour container. So this is about enough to make a good landing strip, well, maybe a little bit more, a good landing strip for the dough ball. So you can see it's nice and sticky and clumpy onto the dough hook, which is what we want, really. I'm sure there's all sorts of like professional cooking science that's happening here with, you know, proteins and glutens and all that stuff. I'm mostly interested in like the ancient Eastern European bubby mentality. Like, oh, this is what we did, and here's why. I don't know why. I don't know the science. It's just what I do. It seems to work out pretty well, you know? All right. So now we have the landing strip prepared. Dump the dough ball right onto it. All right, time for the fun part, which is kneading the dough. I'm gonna take my watch off. So I have the landing strip made, and now I'm just gonna kind of lift it, flip it over, get all of that flour all over it, and then just start patting it down. I'm gonna flatten it out, kind of like, you know, the vision is like pizza dough almost. Like get it nice and flat first before doing anything else. To get all of the flour onto it, to make sure it's nice and floured. And you can feel just for the resistance, you know, you kind of feel it popping up a little bit, which is what you want, no doubt. I believe that's the gluten from what I understand. So I'm sure any professional chefs could tell me, or food scientists. But this just, I mean, I've been doing it for a while, and it feels, this one feels pretty good so far. I'm gonna have to keep mixing it. You can tell kind of like by the resistance, right? So if it flattens out too easy, it's gonna need more flour. And it's not as tough as it needs to be quite yet before I start balling it up. So I'm gonna keep flattening it out before I start making a ball out of it. There it's just now feeling it's starting to get tougher just now. But not quite yet. I'm not ready to start balling it up yet. Okay, it feels pretty tough right now, so that's where it's time to start balling it up. And so when I ball it up, you know, exactly like I said, ball it up. It's in the name. So keep the flour on the countertop. As I ball it, I keep rolling it into itself, kind of like this. So just keeping it worked together, making all that gluten, I believe. So just knead away, just roll it into itself. until you start to see like a little bit of like almost like a tear there. Once you start seeing it tear, it's time to kind of like push roll it, and that's where we're basically near the end. Keep the surface floured. It's time to push roll it. Hope you guys noticed that I wore a black shirt today. That way you can see all of the flour that you're gonna get all over yourself. That, and of course I have to represent my membership in my fraternity, Delta Upsilon, where one of our founding principles is the diffusion of liberal culture. So I am diffusing culture quite liberally as we speak. So as the push rolling, while I'm doing this, again, I don't want it to stick. I'm feeling for how it sticks to the countertop. I don't want it to stick too much yet. And I want to make sure that the dough ball is smooth all the way around. So I'm kind of like, I'm tucking it in gently with each push, and I'm repositioning it. I want to get rid of this. Like I want that to smooth over. So I have to just keep push rolling. All of that flour that we had poured on the counter for the landing strip is now gone. And that will help get rid of that kind of lumpy part of the dough ball to make it a full, smooth ball. Yeah, that little crevice is gone. All right. So now we have a nice dough ball. So it's time for the bowl. Remember we poured that oil in there at the beginning, right? And so we're gonna rest it in there and kind of roll it around into the oil, and we're done with the dough ball. The next thing to do is to have a damp cloth with warm, damp water and cover over that. All right, so I got my damp cloth. It was with hot water, so the cloth is nice and warm, get that humidity part, and this is ready for the first rise, right? What we call the first rise. So this is ready to sit for a few hours until the dough ball doubles in size. So before I hit pause for now, let's take a look at where we're at right now. That's where we're at now. And then when we come back, it's gonna fill up the entire bowl. It's gonna be huge, right? It's supposed to at least double in size, but I haven't really gotten that down to a science yet. So I'm gonna let this sit for a few hours. We have things to do outside the house, but sometimes I'll put it in the oven and let it sit. That's only if I need to crunch time. I'll put the oven on proof mode and then let it sit for like 2 hours, and then it'll fill up the entire bowl. But I'm gonna leave it on the counter for now because it's a bit early. We have things to do. I'm not gonna be back for a few hours, and then by then I'll show you it'll have filled up the entire bowl. And then on to the braiding part, which is nice and fun. All right, it has been a few hours. And you can see here that the dough has definitely filled the bowl. And so now what we're gonna do is braid it before the re-raise. Okay, so for bread baking, you got the raise, or the rise and the re-rise. And so we're gonna braid it before the re-rise. So prepare, of course, the flour. Let's see if that goes on better. Yeah. So prepare the table with flour. Want the floured countertop, and then I also have a couple of some loaf pans that I use. And the reason why is that I like for my challah to be used for sandwiches, basically, and so I like it to rise nice and loafy. So I have a couple of pans for each of these. So, yep, it's just a matter of dumping the dough right onto the floured top, and then making sure that the flour kind of gets all around to the entire thing. I like to kind of thin it out a little bit, stretch it out so it can have even parts along with the ends, because the ends get a little bit floppy. I'm not scientific, so I don't like weigh things. I just kind of guess by feel. So I want to make sure that, you know, feels about evenly spaced. And so once I have everything there, use my little dough cutter thing and just get right down the middle, and it'll be one piece for each loaf because this will make 2 loaves. So set one loaf aside. Then for the other loaf, we're gonna cut it into 6 pieces. I do a six strand braid. I just like the way it looks. It's just my own personal taste, and the way it rises in the loaf pan does a good job. So I'm ready to cut this into 6 equal pieces. So the first thing I do is cut it in half, and then each piece will go into 3. So half there, kind of line them up, judge them, you know. Again, I'm not scientific, I just eyeball some stuff. So there's pieces there and pieces there. It's just a matter of kind of like feeling how they weigh, and it's mostly even. Anything else I can fix later. So for now, I'm just gonna make my snakes and then put them aside, and again, keeping that counter pretty well floured. And so the way I make my snakes is, you know, kind of re-tuck in each individual ball like that, and then start rolling it. You want a little bit of a sticky surface, right? So roll, roll, roll. This feels about right to me. You can go by look or feel or length, and again, not scientific. So this is usually about what I'm dealing with. And I'll put each one over the side and make the next 5. All right, so I have my 6 snakes there. They're about evenly distanced, so that's pretty good. If you have the same length, that's fantastic. I rarely do. This is pretty good. I will put my longest ones at the top, and then my shortest ones at the bottom, and then we'll get into the 6-strand braid. So again, a nice floured surface, so nothing sticks to the countertop. And again, I like to put the longest strands at the top. So kind of organize everything lined up the way you want, strands in order. And so you have 3 snakes on one side, 3 snakes on the other side, and I don't know if you can see that. Yeah, kind of like that. So 3 and 3. And then what we'll do here, I don't even know how to say this. I don't remember like where I learned it on YouTube, but what the baker I was watching was doing. But you have each of the 3 kind of pinch them together. I overlap about an inch or so. And so I pinch all the snakes together. And again, it's important to keep 3 on one side, 3 on the other side, right? So the top strands are going to crisscross. And then after the crisscross, I like to start with the left one up top and then kind of bring it down the middle. Now I'll say middle, but I'm going to push it over to the side. So the top one down to the middle. On the right-hand side, the second snake, not the one that we just switched, the second snake crosses over to the top. And so that same process will repeat, but on the other side. So now on the other side, I have the top snake down, and then the second snake from one side up to the other's top. Okay, so same process. Top snake down, second snake up, switch sides, top snake down, second snake up, top down, second up. And as you're going along, you kind of, you can feel for how the knots are going. And, you can make them looser or tighter. If you're running out of space, scooch a little bit. And you keep going until basically you're running out of space, and at the very end, it's just a matter of like kind of pinching it off. Or since it's Shabbat that we're preparing for, we cut off a little bit for the korban, the commemoration of the sacrifice. So you kind of let that to the side, and then just pinch down the ends, fold down the ends, and you know, here you just kind of like eyeball. You're looking for, you know, symmetry a little bit, and you can poke around and nudge around and tuck around. But this is, I mean, what you're looking at is why I prefer the 6-strand braid. I like the way this looks better. So you can see kind of how that looks is good. Yummy, yummy. And now this one's ready to go into one of those pans. And we'll repeat the process for the other half, right? So remember, we're gonna make 2 loaves. So we just repeat the process for the other half. All right, sometimes when you're making snakes, you can have one that's like a whole lot longer than the others. And so even though everything else may be about the same size, this one's a bit long. I can already feel this one is gonna be small. So you can pinch off some of the longer one and just add it to the small one. It's not that big of a deal. So I'm gonna do that here. So they're about the same size. It's just a little thing that you just keep in mind as you're rolling stuff, you know. Pinch down, crisscross the tops. And then the bottom one that was down is the top one that's going to go down first. So top down, second up. Switch sides. Top down, second up. All right. So this is a good one because we have a lot of like overlap and stuff. So if that's the case here, there's a lot of like not consistent stuff that's just going to get added to the korban, that sacrificial piece. And if it wasn't Shabbat, or you don't practice, or this is not important to you, you can have this much, make a roll out of it, you know, make 3 strands out of this, and then give it to a kid for them to practice braiding with a 3-strand haul. It's up to you. Since it's Shabbat, I'm going to do the korban, so this is just leftover, right? Everything else just like before. Pinch it in, look for symmetry. You can kind of like nudge some things, maneuver, stretch, bunch, whatever you need to do. But this looks pretty good. Yeah, this will come out pretty nicely. So you want to take a look at that. All right, that's not bad there. Not bad there. Okay. So this will go into the other baking pan. For these, once they're in the pan, I'll put them into the oven my oven has a proof setting, and so I put them in the oven on proof for about 2 hours, and then you'll see the re-rise. I'll show you that when it's done. And so I'll put this in, and we'll take a look at how that looks in the pans. So you can see where they that's where they look like now, and you'll see after the re-rise, boom, like they'll be nice and puffy, and then we'll do the egg wash and then the baking. So it is now time to take a look at the loaves after the proofing process is done. Let's see what they look like now. So you remember what they looked like before. Look at that. Okay, so look how big they have gotten. That's that second rise, right? That re-rise that people talk about for bread baking. And so now that that process is done, it is time for the egg wash. So I'm going to take out each loaf and prepare the egg wash. Now the egg wash is simple. It's only 1 egg and a little bit of water. So it's not that big of a deal. So just get your little egg cracked in there and a tiny bit of water. Mix, mix, mix. Now, sometimes, remember I mentioned honey earlier. Sometimes this is a good spot to add honey to. It gives it a nice, like, sweet layer. And again, I'm not going to do that right now. As I'm doing this, it's time to set the oven for 385 degrees. So we're going to bake at 385. And there's a bit of a not a science, it's just a thing that I do. I'll tell you about it. So first is egg wash. I want to make sure everything is coated nice and light. And so you want to brush nice and light. I learned to do this once because I had let the re-rise happen for too long, and they were super inflated. And I was brushing on a bit hard, and I deflated them. So I know that when I'm brushing on the egg wash, just to kind of, be gentle. Don't press down too hard. Just make sure everything is dripping in there. You want to make sure they're nice and covered, right? So not only is it egg bread for the egg that was in the goop that we made, it's egg bread for the egg wash as well. So you usually go to the store and you go to buy challah, and some of the people who aren't familiar with the Jews or Judaism or Hebrew or the language, they'll say, oh, you want challah? Like challah? And so if they say challah, you just say egg bread. Oh. And that's challah. So we call it challah bread. Now the one egg would be good for both loaves. I don't like to leave any egg over. So even though I've coated both of these pretty well, I have some egg left over. I'm just going to recoat until all the egg is gone. So the oven is set for 385 degrees. This is going to be the cooking process, and I'll show you as we go through it. But once the oven reaches temperature, I'm going to put both loaves in for only 5 minutes at first. And you'll see why, because I don't like to have like too burnt of a crust. And so I'll put this in for 5 minutes at first. And then I'm going to cover them with some aluminum foil, and then I'll let it cook for the rest of the time, which is about another 25 minutes. So it's going to be a total of 30 minutes at 285, but I stop it at 5 minutes and I cover it, and I'll show you that as we get there. Okay, we've been baking at 385 for 5 minutes now, and so the next trick that I have up my sleeve is to cover each of the loaves with some foil so they don't get too crispy on the top, right? I don't like my loaves crispy. So the reason why I wait 5 minutes is that it's long enough to where kind of like the egg wash cooks a little bit and the foil won't stick to the egg wash. So I wait, 5 or 6 minutes or so, and you can see here that I have the cooking is happening on the bottom rack. So I put both loaves in the bottom rack, and you can see there's already some gold that's starting at the back. So cover it with foil. Careful not to touch too many things, right? Ouch. All right, so now that that's covered, put it back in. It's still at 385. And now I let it cook for another 25 minutes. So it's going to be a total of 30 minutes at 385. And it might be a little bit longer, depend, you know, who knows. So I'll let it cook for another 25 minutes. All right, we have now reached the time, and you're gonna see why I put the foil on it, because we're done cooking. I'm gonna pull these things out, and you're gonna see why I do that little trick. So, again, from the bottom rack, if you notice, we cooked the korban, by the way. Just like in the temple, we burned a lot of the sacrifices, so there you go. There. All right. Now, wait till you see this. This is exactly why we have those little covers on it. You're going to see that the top crust is going to be just perfect. There we go. So look at that crust. That is just perfect. It's not too crispy, because if without that cover, you can hear that. Without that cover, that's going to be the whole thing, and it's too burnt for my liking. So I put the cover on, and that's going to be good. And then we'll take a look at the other one. Look at that, golden perfection. And again, I like to put them in the loaf pans, because you can see how tall they're going to be. These are going to be perfect for sandwiches. So that's why I put them in the pans. So they still have the braiding for the look, and they're in the pan, so they have the height for utility, and they make great French toast, great sandwiches. It's fantastic. So that's my challah recipe. If you're following it, I hope you enjoy it, and since it's Shabbat tonight, Shabbat Shalom.